Hello, everybody. This is Recotopia, episode 97. The big recommend today is going to be Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Happy New Year to everybody. It's 2024. You guys remember when you were a child in the 80s and you were like, man, the year 2000 is a really futuristic year where we're going to have like flying cars and everything. It's going to be so crazy. It's going to be like Minority Report out there. And now it's 2024 and everything's exactly the same as it
Only
was. With us today, we have Aaron Dicer.
Hi, Host and Arenos.
And we have Jeremy Scott.
What's up?
Yeah, that's right. So does anybody have any small recommends?
Oh, indeed I do. I'm going to kick us off by talking a little bit about Godzilla -1.
Oh, I saw this over the weekend.
Son of bitches. You both seen this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sons of bitches.
Yeah.
I will join the chorus of those saying that this is worth your time to check out. I have never been like a huge Godzilla fan. In my first real experience with Godzilla was the Broderick one. So like that was my introduction to really like I knew of the character, but I just never really seen any of the old man in suit movies or anything like that. And then have become a little more familiar over time. And then when they redid kind of the monster universe and did that Godzilla movie, I came a little more interested. This is my favorite by far. Like, I have never seen a Godzilla movie I loved as much as this one. And I think the reason is pretty simple. It is a movie that understands that the monster and the destruction that the monster causes is a canvas upon which the human stories are told. And this movie gets that more than any of the, big monster movies we've seen recently get that and understand that. The monster isn't the villain. The monster is just kind of the motivating factor of, the stories and the relationships and what we're experiencing. I think this movie is beautiful. I think it's meaningful. I think, the destruction parts are captivating and interesting and well done. But, this is about the human characters and what they're going through. And that stuff's really, really good here. So, yeah, I really, really dug Godzilla -1.
It also has like a tiny budget, right? Like for the visuals, like I think I read that it just has a tiny budget. Like if this was a Hollywood production, it would be a $250 million film. But they made it stretch. They made it work. And that's kind of a theme this year, right? Because that Gareth Edwards movie, The Creator, also had a really small budget, but really high visuals. Anyway, I'm very excited for Godzilla -1. Yeah, I've never been a big Godzilla fan either, but everything I read about this sounds amazing.
It's probably my favorite Godzilla I've seen too, and it reminded me of the original, the very first one that came out, because it had other things in mind, even then, because the 1954 version of it is all about someone who has created a weapon that can kill Godzilla, but he is torn about using it because he doesn't want governments getting a hold of that weapon. And it's very conscious, obviously, of the atomic bomb and everything, because it's only a few years after it was dropped. So, yeah, I really, really enjoyed it too. Second, that small recommend. What about you, Jim?
I watched a little Netflix original film about a week and a half ago called Leave the World Behind with some stars. Julia Roberts, Mahershala Ali, Ethan Hawke, sneaky Kevin Bacon cameo, like movie stealing Kevin Bacon cameo. But the first thing I want to tell you about this movie is that it is actively being review bombed by people who hate Barack Obama. They will openly tell you this if you look through some of the Google reviews, which are copy pasted. I read hundreds this morning, and they all said the same thing: the Obama should stick to politics, etc. So if you rely
I didn't even think Barack's performance was that bad in this movie.
He's an executive producer, by the way, folks. And he and his wife have an overall production deal with Netflix. This is part of that. Anyway, if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, same thing. So don't trust the user reviews on this particular movie. There are 10,000 on Google. I looked at Saltburn. It barely has 1,000. So Leave the World Behind. is being review bombed. I'm here to tell you it's pretty awesome. It's pretty interesting. One of the things that I like most about it is the vagueness of the apocalyptic event that's going on around them. There is an interpretation of the film, I think, that suggests they do tell you what's happening, but they don't really. Like, you could argue that the apocalyptic event is nuclear, is alien, is kaiju. That's not really what this movie's interested in. This movie's interested in human relationships, particularly new ones, and how they form in circumstances that are kind of beyond our control and dire. So this is more of a think piece. It's an actor's showcase. And I was just really riveted from beginning to end. This is another one of these movies that people are online like, ending of this movie explained. And I'm like, was the ending really all that big? It was. But while the movie does spare plenty of details, I think, the plot, what happens, is pretty straightforward and really interesting. I'm not seeing anything quite like this. So there you go.
I love this movie. It's growing on me the more I think about it. Sam Esmail, who you may know better as the creator of Mr. Robot, which was a huge thing, has gone on to do some other shows, produce some stuff, and he's directing this. And it is a movie that at first I thought was about the apocalypse, but it's actually about technology. This movie is about how we relate to entertainment technology. And there is scene after scene in this movie that asks us to ask the question, is entertainment through technology separating us from each other or bringing us together, or is it doing both? Is it a healing thing in our life that gives us space to, recuperate and, turn off a little bit? Or is it numbing us to the reality of what's going on around us? It asks those questions and lets us go, you know what? That's a nuanced answer. And I love the way this movie plays in those areas. I think the movie starts, if I'm remembering correctly, on a pan through, it starts with, a drone shot, and then it pans through the vehicle to all the participants in the vehicle and the different ways they're interacting with entertainment technology, totally separate from each other, having these completely separate experiences. And then the movie just goes from there and just really layers that theme in to the very ending, which is, again, about what is, technology mean to us and entertainment mean to us through technology. So, I found a lot to love about this, even beyond what I thought were great performances and the mystery. Had a really old school M. Night feel to it. Like this could have been like an M. Night movie, and that it's only interested in giving you the information you need at that moment to understand what the movie wants you to understand. I thought this was really, really well done.
Aaron just hijacked my small recommend, everybody, to recommend even stronger than I did.
That's what we do.
Mine is American Fiction.
Another one.
The movie where Jeffrey Wright plays an author who he writes really good fiction, and as a statement on the world at large, doesn't sell very well. I've actually heard this from songwriters before around here, where they write stuff that they think is awesome, but it doesn't sell, so they have to, quote, dumb it down in order to get it sold. So he writes these books that don't sell, and he sees that there's this other author played by Issa Rae who is writing so-called black fiction, but has this perspective that is like, is got street language in it, and it's like purposefully misspelled words and things like that in it. And when he hears her read a passage from this book, and she's very well celebrated and everything, he thinks, maybe as a joke, I'll just write a book that is completely just nonsensical and try to make it and pass it off as real, like based on real life black experience, even though it's not. And he just writes this thing that starts off with my pathology, but then he quickly changes it to my pathology on the top of the book, and he starts writing all this stuff that's not true, but it's really based it on stuff that he's watching on TV, like The Wire and stuff like that. So he's like writing this book based on that. He thinks there's no way, this is kind of a joke. He writes this book and he turns it into his publisher, John Ortiz, who's like, there's no way I'm going to try to sell this book. He's like, look, just give it to a couple of guys. I know it probably won't sell, but I think this is funny, basically. And Ortiz, of course, immediately sells the book for $4 million or something like, there's some insane amount of money. And now that it's selling, Jeffrey Wright has to become a different person and like hide his identity and and try to speak like somebody who's just come out of jail and all this other stuff to promote the book. But this movie isn't really completely about that journey, which is kind of interesting to me. It's more about like he's got this life aside from his writing that he's trying to get together. He's got a sister played by Tracy Ellis Ross. He's got a brother played by Sterling K. Brown, who's both of these people are amazing in this movie. Love Sterling K. Brown a lot. And he meets a new woman he starts dating, played by Erica Alexander. And so it's really sort of like shows what his life is like while this is happening. And then there's to add a further complication into it. He has been tapped to be a judge of a fiction contest of some sort to get an award, to award the year's best fiction. And they're reading all and he includes him and Issa Rae along with 3 other people. And they're reading all these books and trying to come up with a winner. But at the last minute, wouldn't you know, his book that he can't tell anybody that he wrote is introduced into the finalists for it. And I think it's funny too. At one point it's called My Pathology. And then like, because he hates this book that he's written so much, there's a point where he's discussing like all this stuff to market it and everything. And he's like, you know what? I want to change the title. He's like, what do you want to change the title to? And he's like, fuck. The title is Fuck.
Which, by the way, was the working title of this movie until very late.
Oh no.
And he's like, I'm not going to even do this deal if you don't change the title. And of course they're very willing to, I mean, after a little bit of discussion, they're willing to change it to fuck. Anyway, this is a very original movie. I highly recommend it. Jeffrey Wright is always amazing. He's so good in everything. I don't think I've ever seen one bad Jeffrey Wright performance.
No.
So.
I will attempt not to pull another dicer and hijack this recommend as well. But I will actually be talking about this movie a little bit as we talk about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner too, because I think there's some real interesting similarities in how these two movies deal with race. And I think it's really interesting to watch a movie like this that you don't expect. You just expect it to be maybe, quality and comedy. But it turns out that it's kind of a meta movie. There's a lot of meta-ness to this movie that you're not expecting that I really, really thought was smart. It's a really good watch for sure.
Well, and as Castro says, he says it was $750K for the book and then $4 million for the movie rights later on. So yeah, he's profiting on something that he really, really hated. There's a lot of really awesome discussions too about what makes a good book and what is the balance between art and commerce and things of that nature. So I really highly recommend it.
It's also very similar to The Lost City, at least in the opening, because Sandra Bullock writes these archaeology books that nobody buys, and on a lark she writes a romance novel, and she becomes a super millionaire from romance novels.
Okay, on to the big recommend, which is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner from 1967. Aaron, you are our big recommend.
Yeah.
So, take it away.
I'm really excited to talk about this movie. We start with a shot of an airplane coming in for a landing in San Francisco over the sounds of the song Glory of Love. Glory of Love will be our constant companion through this movie.
Yes, it will.
It is all throughout the score and as well even the soundtrack in another place. They depart the plane in San Francisco. It's John, who's played by Sidney Poitier, and Joanna, played by Catherine Houghton, an interracial couple. We join them as they walk into their mom's art gallery looking for her. She's not there. They play with a kinetic sculpture, and they're met by Hillary, who has a clear discomfort with something. What could it be? What could Hillary be discomforted by? They head to Joey's house where John meets Tilly, the house caretaker, who also has a clear discomfort with something. We will continue to flesh out these discomforts throughout the movie. We then, let's see, we cut to Joanna and Tilly in a heated conversation about how Tilly doesn't think John should be getting above his place. So we already have the racial conversation starting, different perspectives from different people. We then have her mom, Christina, coming home. Christina is played by Katharine Hepburn. And then we cut between Joey talking to her mom and John talking to his dad. Each of them are trying to figure out how to tell them that they are in an interracial relationship. It's at this point we find out that he's 37 and she's 23. Which, despite not passing the half plus 7 rule, is not the thing people seem to be focusing on in this movie.
There's a half plus 7 rule?
Yes.
I've never heard of this.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing.
That is it.
Oh,
that's the rule.
That's
half
new
plus
hotness,
7.
is it?
Yes.
They have to be half your age plus 7 for you to date them,
Well,
unless you're DiCaprio.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Specifically, Christina is in the midst of hearing about this amazing man from her daughter as he walks out, and she freezes up so much that Dr. Prentice gives her a fainting diagnosis. The dad arrives home. That is Matt, played by Spencer Tracy in his final role. In fact, he passed away just over 2 weeks after this movie stopped filming, I think. So it was very much his last movie. He's told there's a doctor in the house, so he has a nice conversation and just doesn't quite put 2 and 2 together until he's almost walking out and then realizes something else is going on. So instead of playing golf, he stays. Once John says that they want to get married, they begin having this conversation. John lays out that they want to marry quickly and want full approval immediately. We want it today. Matt calls off his golf game and then immediately calls in a background check on John. John finds a private audience with Matt and Christine and tells them something he's not telling Joanna, that the decision is actually theirs. They are going to be the ones who decide whether this marriage has happened because, in his opinion, it cannot work. If they are against it, it would break Joanna's heart too much. After he leaves, the background check comes in, and John is everything he said he was and more. They then look across to see them very happy together, having a good time and laughing, and the parents continue to ponder. Meanwhile, we cut to an impromptu dance party between 2 characters. We have no idea who they are and never see them again. We soon find out. We soon find out that they have not even slept together yet, and this is at John's insistence.
Which
this is
I thought was bullshit, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, it is funny in the fact that there is the "You're burning my shirt, mother" line at the end, which I thought was really funny. We then see John and Matt discussing music, sports, and children of interracial couples. They are getting into some serious conversation. We then find out that John's parents want to come into town, and Joanna invites them to dinner because she just thinks everyone is dramatizing this whole situation. This is really easy to Joanna. She sees that there's no big deal here. So let's see. Joanna tells Tilly that they need more steaks, and then consequently invents Uber Eats to get them there in 1967. So that's always fun.
Yeah.
She says call a taxi to get it here.
That's right. It's Uber Eats. That's what I was saying. Katharine Hepburn then rolls the credits right towards Spencer Tracy, and he is not pleased at all the pressure now that he's being put under to make this decision, as everybody seems to be the answer to who's coming to dinner. Everybody's going to be there. including the Monsignor, who we are now meeting. This is a good friend of theirs. They reiterate a few times that they are not Catholic, but that they are just really good friends with the Monsignor. He drops by and has some few platitudes and good words to say about interracial couples. Hillary then drops by to commiserate with Katharine Hepburn. And Hepburn immediately fires her with an emphasis on the straight fire.
Best scene in the movie.
I watched this movie for the first time last year, and it was right after Sidney Poitier's death.
Mm-hmm.
And I rewound that scene to watch it again, and then on this viewing did the same exact thing, rewound the scene. So yeah,
so good,
incredible,
so good. Matt and Christine then go out to get some fresh Oregon boysenberry sherbet. We then cut to Tilly confronting John now about finding out what Black Power really means. She's going to let him have it, if he's not in the right place. Then John backs into a black man who gets a standing ovation from the parking lot for chewing out Spencer Tracy. Then we cut to an Asian restaurant where Joey and John are getting dinner with a friend couple whilst a standing pianist, again, plays The Glory of Love. Back home now, a flustered Matt tells Christina that he's made up his mind and he will be saying no. Matt has made a decision. So she goes and cries at the Golden Gate Bridge. They meet John's family at the airport, and then they're also shocked to see the white girl. Meanwhile, Spencer Tracy is having a drink shaving session for some reason, and Katharine Hepburn lets him know how wrong she thinks he actually is. More conversations continue to happen. More depth is sought about the racial issues that are involved with different people sharing their opinions. The Monsignor and Christina, Tilly and Christina have a conversation. Matt and the Monsignor have a conversation. Then the dinner guests all arrive, and the moms excuse themselves to find that they are in the same position of wanting what's best for the kids. And the dads excuse themselves to find they are in the same position of thinking it's a terrible idea. John then has the conversations with each parent to hear their thoughts. B. Richards, an amazing actor in this movie. I found it interesting that neither of the black parents had names that I saw in the cast list. But B. Richards is so good in this. And then tells Spencer Tracy if he could just remember back to when he was horny. If you could just think back about, when you actually enjoyed sex.
That's really what she says. That's really what she says. You don't remember what it's like to want a woman, essentially.
Yeah. John then tells his dad to get him and his whole generation off of his back in a very powerful scene. Spencer Tracy then goes off to ponder at the Golden Gate Bridge before coming back in to deliver.
Must close to there.
Yeah, it's right out there. It's right out their backyard. Before coming back in to deliver one of the most incredible moments of acting in the history of turning 24 still pictures in every second into the illusion of motion. All right, guys, what did you think of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Go ahead, Chris.
I love this movie. I now having seen it twice. I loved it then too, but loved it the first time too. But there is one thing about this movie that I think it reminds me of the conditions in which Jackie Robinson was allowed to play Major League Baseball when they put Sidney Poitier in here, and the reason why I think them not having sex is bullshit is because it sounds like they're trying to make everything about him good and like everything is positive. There is absolutely no negative to this except for the fact that it's so fast, but like they make him the most decorated doctor ever.
Yeah.
In this thing, they, well, it's not about sex because they haven't had sex yet, and he still wants to marry her. There's even a point too where I think they're consciously making this movie knowing it's going to hit some very racist places, and they don't want to make anything like, oh well, the only reason they're going out together is because of this reason or that reason or whatever. I think when they introduced that one younger black woman into the movie and show Sidney Poitier going, ooh, look at her, I wonder where she'll be later. it's not just something where it's like, oh, he only likes white women or something like that, which is, I feel like that's the reason why they parade that character in there. There's really no other reason.
That character's really out of place. Yeah.
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 I don't know if there's any real reason for that other than that. That said, all of the everything around this movie is amazing. I would have liked to have seen it though if it were somebody who weren't so perfect, being the husband in this thing. So I would have liked to have seen that, but you're talking about 1967. A lot of things happened in 1967, which I'll let you get to, Dicer, if you were going to get to those notes, but a lot of things
whoever
happen.
wants to talk about it, but yeah, that was a really
Loving
big
versus
year.
Virginia thing happens like right after this movie is released. Not because of this movie being released, but it happens just a couple of days or something. It's like not long after.
Well, there's a couple interesting things that are negated from this movie, like almost immediately. There's a line about, what you're doing would be illegal in, 14 states or whatever it was. Well, that line was wrong by the time the movie came out because of that court case. And then also they talk about inviting Martin Luther King Jr. to the dinner. And he died, was assassinated before the movie came out, or maybe while it was still in theaters.
It was while it was in theaters,
and they cut that scene out after that. So it was really interesting.
Can you imagine Chris being a projectionist and getting a call from the studio saying, "Okay, we need you to go to reel 4, look for this.
Well,
gotta cut this scene."
I mean, that's a very difficult cut to make, but I imagine they had it where it was like, go to this exact spot here and count a certain amount of frames and so on and so forth. They did that before with something I can't remember when I was working. I mean, the easiest ones were like when you had to pull off reel 6 and put on a new reel 6, the end of the last reel, because they did something with the credits or something like that. But there were times you had to go and cut, like they did that with the program. Remember that, where the people were there was that railroad scene and people actually emulated it, so they had to cut that railroad scene out and everything.
Program, man.
Yeah,
not all about that movie.
But anyway,
Craig Sheffer's in that movie, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's in everything in the early 90s.
He was. This was my first time watching this movie. I have a lot of thoughts. Almost all of them are great. But this movie has lived in my head, have not seen it, as a comedy. I feel like history and society has told me this is a comedy. Maybe that's because in the reversed remake, it has Ashton Kutcher in it and doesn't make a lot of serious films. I don't know. Even if you just Google says that this movie is a comedy thriller, which when I saw that, I was like, ooh, somebody's going to get knifed. But no, this is a straight up, I think this is a straight up drama.
A thriller, that's for sure. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah.
I think this is a straight up drama that has a couple of really funny moments. But I went in expecting a comedy. And so when I started seeing all this powerful acting, I was surprised. I said that Hepburn firing Hillary is the best scene in the movie. I think that's true. Second best scene in the movie is the final speech by Spencer Tracy, which I wrote should be required viewing for acting students. But a close second and a half best scene is that speech he gives his father. He screams, "I owe you nothing. If you'd carried that bag a million miles, it would have been because that's what you were supposed to do." I was really moved by all the acting, and I was really surprised by how nuanced all of the writing was, being that it was in the 60s. And I'll never be able to watch this movie in the context of living in the 60s where interracial marriage was recently illegal, but it still feels like it would play largely this way today in a lot of cases, in a lot of households, which just shows how, little we've come, and despite how far we've come. Go ahead.
It's also weird, by the way, that Poitier was not nominated for anything that came out in 1967. Not this movie, not In the Heat of the Night, and there's To Sir with Love too, which is a lesser movie to those two. But he had been nominated before, and he'd won for Lilies of the Field. It's crazy he didn't get nominated for one of these movies. I don't know what was going on with that. That made no sense. But anyway, that scene that you're talking about with Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn knew how sick he was at the end. Yep. And that's the reason why, it's not just the performance that he's doing. She knows he doesn't have much time. In fact, the production nearly didn't happen because they didn't think Spencer Tracy had much time. And he died 17 days after that thing that last speech that he did. So just imagine what that was like, watching him do that in front of, it took a week to do that whole scene.
Do that one scene. Yeah.
So
yeah, but it's amazing. I believe she's crying in that scene for about 7 different reasons, but it could be purely because he's just acting so amazing in that scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really great way to end the movie. He's basically just telling everybody to shut up and listen to me. And you think, at least he wants you to think, he's going to say the no, but then he says the yes. I got to talk about the closed captions on this movie. I'm sorry. I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but I don't know who wrote these or when they were written. I watched this on Amazon. I think about 40% of the words said were missing completely. The one that I wrote down was early on when Spencer Tracy says, if you don't explain to me in the next 2 minutes what you three are playing at, and he gets cut off. That and the captions became, what are you three playing at? ?
Yeah.
And I'm really offended by that. And even if I were fully deaf and couldn't hear those other words, I would see those lips moving and I would know I'm not being told everything that's being said. And it's just condescending as all hell. I had to get off my chest.
I get the sense. I saw the same thing, by the way. I watched it on Amazon and was treated to that awful subtitle mess that was going on. I think there was a point in time. This is obviously an old, never has been redone type of thing. I think they go back and redo a lot of movies. This movie's hard to find on Blu-ray, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I think they did something a long time ago where it was just give them the gist of what is being said in this scene. You don't need to say every word. They just need to know what's going on and be sure to put the best bits in there. And I think that's what happened with these, and that's no excuse. They need to go back and fix these things that clearly below average and everything. But I think that's what we deal with a lot of these older movies a lot of times, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I feel like Amazon is the kind of company that could probably find a few pennies under their sofa to pay for somebody to sit and watch a movie and type out the proper captions. They don't do it because they don't give a shit. And anyway, maybe I'll make enough noise one day. 2 other observational things I saw about this movie. When there's a point near the end where he pulls at a single tie from his tie rack, and then all of the other ties slowly fall one by one after that. And I gotta wonder if that was a happy accident or if they somehow set up the tie rack to do, because when we did Mad World, there's a scene where the guy kicks over a candle and it starts a fire, and I read that they had to do that scene 75 times to get that right. So I'm wondering if they had to do the tie scene a whole bunch of I couldn't find any information about it, but it stood out to me as such a great little visual of the chaos of the moment. Feels like it has to have been on purpose.
Yeah, considering that it's 2 guys confronting each other about their beliefs and in that scene.
Yeah.
It feels like, let's not break from this. Let's not, I guess some directors would be worried that this would be too distracting during the conversation that they're having and everything, but they let it go and it becomes, I think it's a happy accident. I don't think there's any.
I would love to believe that.
Yeah. I don't think there's any chance that was the way that was meant to go. So
that's awesome. But the other observational thing I wrote down was when they go to the drive-in for the ice cream, which is just a weird scene anyway. They pull in, and that entire second row of cars has blocked in the entire first row of cars. There's 7 cars right up at the front of the restaurant, and none of those bastards can go anywhere because they're all double parked in. And I thought that is purely for movie, like, did they really have drive-ins like that in the 60s? Because I would never go to a drive-in like that.
No, me either. No idea. That scene is weird and a little out of place, but I think the reason why they put it in there is because Tracy seems like he's close to being like, I'm okay with this until that happens. And it just so happens to be a black driver in the car who yells at him. And that sort of turns him back into this, I don't want this to happen. You know,
he even says something fairly racist, like it's only been so many hours and I've already encountered 3 or 4 of them or something like that. It's
right.
Like straightforwardly. Anyway.
Yeah.
I also think it's fascinating that the movie, and I think this would play today as well, does not make them a staunchly conservative, kind of bigoted set of parents. It's actually the opposite. Hepburn wins him over early on by saying, we taught our daughter that discrimination is bad, that all races are equal. Like, we can't have a problem with this, because I think that makes his conflict a lot more interesting and nuanced, but also kind of speaks to the fakeness of a lot of liberal talking points.
Oh yeah,
are only talking points because when they come home to roost, we don't actually follow through on what we say.
I want to dig just a little bit deeper into some of the racial stuff in this, because there are certainly, you mentioned the black exceptionalism, Chris, of the character, and that certainly was even an issue when this came out. There were many in the black community, if my reading is correct, who didn't like the way that this movie portrayed race, because it kind of gives the idea that the reason it's okay is because he's a good one, you know, like that's exactly the idea. And it's this interesting tug and pull in racial relationships, in media specifically. You'll watch it in media between these two ideas of color blindness, this idea that we're all the same, the color of our skin doesn't matter, it's not something that's important, it shouldn't even be noticed, shouldn't even be something we see, right? Like, I don't even see color, like, you know, the color blindness thing. And then the cultural appreciation thing, and a real understanding of, no, it actually does matter because it changes the way you're able to live your life. Like, it changes actual things in your day-to-day life as a person of color in this country. And so that has, there's an understanding of, you know, if you're espousing color blindness, then you are pretending that the issue is solved, right? Like, that there's this thing. So this movie, like, I think John even has a line to this. He says something like, you think of yourself as a colored man, I think of myself as a man. Yeah. That's a beautiful line. That's a beautiful perspective, but it plays into that color blindness idea. Like, this idea, it's no big deal. It's not something. This is kind of the Joanna perspective, right? This isn't a big deal. This is just two people, you know, getting married, and there's some real beauty there. But if it's not balanced with this other idea, then we're completely out of balance. It's one of the reasons I think American Fiction is a really good tie-in with this movie, because American Fiction, you would think from the presentation of it, the marketing of it, that it's about this idea of black culture as a thing about gangs or drugs or slavery, right? Like, those are the three things. But it's actually a movie about just characters who happen to be black living their lives. You know, like, that's what it's bringing to you. And so it also plays with this nuance of color blindness versus cultural appreciation and awareness. And I think that there's a real tendency for many of us to want to fall into one of those or the other, instead of understanding the nuance of the balance in both things being true and the importance of both of those things.
Well, Aaron, you're the recommender. You're not allowed to make a super secret double feature pick. Like, you just keep stepping on everyone's role this episode.
I'm sorry. I also, my one other big thing, and this is from this viewing of this movie that I think I realized. Yeah, I don't think this movie is about racism. I know that's a really interesting thing to say. I think this movie is about love is love. I think if you look at that last speech, It is all about the idea that love is love no matter who it's between. You could substitute this movie to be about a homosexual couple. You could substitute this movie to be about anything. The answer is love, and what are we doing? Like that
could be about Brad who plays his guitar in the garage all day. Yeah.
Sure. So I think race is kind of the canvas upon which we are telling a story about love and about, whose right is it to say, what two human beings can't love each other. So that's, something else that kind of popped out to me on this one. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it is time for the super secret double feature on this one. Jeremy, what did you think?
All right. This is something I think we should address. I think we should probably all bring 2 moving forward in case one of us takes the other ones. So I wrote down 3 because I wasn't sure if Chris's would be the same as mine, and I may step on Chris's right now, doubly so, because I sat on the birdcage for a really long time for the very reasons you were just talking about, Aaron, where it's about love is love, and the parents, on both sides sort of having to make their peace with a relationship they don't necessarily at the outset approve of. But I felt like, oddly, given what I just said and your big speech there about love is love, I ultimately felt like I had to connect it to race somehow.
Sure.
And so I went with, this has already been mentioned in the comments, I went with Get Out. Not because it is playing with all of the same plot details. We do have an interracial couple and an odd set of parents who are liberal that are super comfortable with it. But I just think thematically, a lot of what's going on in that movie would pair well with this movie. And then we would get the thriller that Google says, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is, with the comic thriller. So we could have that Get Out after that. Tonally, I don't think it would be a great match, but thematically, conversation startingly, I think it would be a really good double feature.
Mine was also Get Out. Let's go to questions. Yeah, I believe I small recommended Guess Who's Coming to Dinner not too long after I watched it over a year ago. I guess it was about a year ago. And I think I mentioned Get Out. It feels like a conversation that is had in the car early on mimics this one that's at the beginning in the car of this one, because she is so certain that her parents are so liberal that they'll understand this relationship immediately, that that there's not going to be a problem whatsoever. Like, why do we even need to give a preamble here? Let's just introduce you and say, I'm getting married to this man after 10 days knowing him and everything, and just move on out. Everything will be fine. And he gives a knowing look, much like Daniel Kaluuya does in Get Out, basically saying, I've lived in this world and I know that what you say isn't always what is really buried deep down when a lot of people outwardly say a lot of things that they don't really truly believe. So yeah, mine was also Get Out. I had heard that I thought American Fiction was a really good one as well. And yeah, so whatever, we overlapped on one, not a big deal. But all right, so what is next week's movie, Jeremy?
I actually almost emailed you guys when I was making the prep email, because now that we are three, I wasn't really positive it was my turn. I couldn't remember. I even had to pull up old emails. Let's go with 2004's Michael Mann thriller, Collateral. Let's kill some people.
This actually is a thriller.
Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise for the most part. You do have Mark Ruffalo, Jada Pinkett Smith, Jason Statham, Peter Berg. This is on Pluto TV for free with ads. It is on Paramount Plus with a subscription. I have not seen this movie in probably 8 or 9 years. I know it to be one of my favorite Michael Mann movies. And Tom Cruise does not very often play the villain. And
yeah, this may be the only time he's played the villain.
It's very interesting to watch. And the basic premise is Jamie Foxx is a cab driver, picks up Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise says, "Hey, I got 5 appointments. You're going to be my driver all night." Turns out to be a hitman going around hitting people. And then where it goes from there is something you will enjoy next week. So yeah, Collateral is going to be our pick, homework. And I think, holy shit, we have time for a question or two. Holy shit.
Yes, we do.
Here we go. Questions from the fans. If you had to try and predict which horror movies from the last few years people will still be talking about in 50 years' time, what springs to mind?
I think this X Pearl Maxine trilogy is going to stay with people for a while. Just the way it's, I'm hoping Maxine knocks it out of the park so that this can be a really all three are good. Let's not have a Return of the Jedi in this one. I think it's going to be something that's studied, because these three I have a feeling that the third movie is going to be different from the other two movies. The two movies that are out right now or that had come out are completely different movies, but they're part of the. I can't wait to see what that's like once it finishes and everything. So I think those will be talked about. The Ari Aster movies like Hereditary and Midsummer seem to have some long-lasting appeal too, even though they're very strange movies and they're very hard to, I don't know, sometimes for a common audience member just looking for some jump scares, it's not the type of movie for them. But I think in many years from now, we're gonna have audience, we're gonna have people who find these movies and go, wow, this is really amazing stuff. They were doing stuff with horror here that is just cutting edge. So yeah, I think those movies will stand the test of time.
Aaron?
I found this question extremely difficult, mainly because I'm not a horror aficionado, so it's hard for me to understand the context. So my brain basically went back and was like, okay, so if someone asked this question in 1973, what is still being talked about today that was already out in 73? And it just seemed like the really successful franchises continue to, linger in people's consciousness in big, meaningful movies. Those are the two kind of things. So I'm thinking, okay, so 2073. So I went with The Conjuring. I just think The Conjuring is such a well-made film and, has a big universe attached to it now and everything. I can see 50 years from now, people still talking about The Conjuring and in those movies. Same for Quiet Place was another one I thought that about. So
I don't know if James Wan gets as much credit as he should. He's made a lot of these big movies that you don't really see a style really, but the horror movies that he's done has his style, and I think he's really good. He may need to go back to some more personal movies to really fill out that filmography at some point. But I think The Conjuring is a good choice actually.
Yeah,
maybe these Aquaman experiences will be like his Iron Man 2.
I hope so.
And like Favreau, he'll go make his chef and refine his. Okay, so one I have is a prediction. Just because I think this is fun, because there's really no way to know, right? There's no way to know what's going to be, Evil Dead in 40 years. But I think of the movies he's made so far, I think that Nope will be more remembered than Us or Get Out. Honestly, it's actually, I like Us and Get Out better than I like Nope, but I think Nope has a lot more really interesting things to say.
Yeah.
If you put those movies under a microscope, I think, literally, I think looking at Nope under a microscope would be insanity, going crazy. But then I just wanted to shout out One Cut of the Dead. It was one of my favorite movies. I feel like a few generations of film students sees that movie and it will definitely become a cult classic.
I do hope that movie gets seen by more people
I like that idea.
Years. And at some point, have you done that since I was gone? Did you do One Cut of the Dead?
No.
Okay.
No,
maybe that should be one of your is it hard to find it?
I don't know about that. I did buy the Blu-ray when I watched it, but it was on Shudder at one point.
Yeah, need to do that one at some point probably. But
yeah, it's on the Roku channel right now.
Yeah. Okay. Got a time for another question?
We do. Let's do one more, and then we'll go to lunch. Will we go to lunch? What is your favorite line reading by an actor that takes an otherwise boring line and makes it magical via their delivery?
I've said this one, I think, a few times. I know I've said it to people before outside of the podcast, but in the movie Role Models, there's a part where Sean William Scott has sex with one of the camp counselors or whatever they're at. They've taken all these, these kids that they shepherd or whatever out into do camping or whatever. And he finds this one camp counselor that he likes and they have sex or whatever. And then he's like on a whole bunch of stuff and he like passes out and outside and he's completely naked. And everybody wakes up and they see him on the ground, just lying naked on the ground. And David Wayne, the guy who directed the movie, has a small role in there. He says, that's a classic case of guy on the ground. And I just love it so much. It's so silly. And then there's a line in session 9 where David Caruso says, "Hey, fuck you," or whatever. The camera zooms in on him and everything. It's just batshit insane for what it's like. It comes out of nowhere. So I love that line reading as well.
I just went with everything Jeff Bridges says in The Big Lebowski. I think his line readings in that movie are so good throughout. For specificness, I did pull out "That's just like your opinion, man."
Yeah,
the fantastic way he says it, it's just like your opinion, man. Like it's so good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love him in that movie, and I think he makes that dialogue just sing. So,
well, speaking of Jeff Bridges, Castrif in the chat says Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a bunch of scraps.
Yeah, that's a great
there's also
delivery.
Jeff Bridges.
I'm going with Billy Crudup in Almost Famous when he's at that house party on drugs and the kid says, "Do you want to watch me feed a mouse to my snake?" And Billy Crudup goes, "Yes." And it's the most, I don't know how he conveys 7 emotions with a single word, but he's excited, surprised, shocked.
He's great at line delivery, man. He's the best thing about the morning show. Like his line deliveries on that show are so good.
Even in Star Trek 2009, when he's the bad guy, he says that line, "Hello, Christopher," and it's just fucking menacing, even though he's just saying hello to Christopher.
What makes that line
Go ahead.
What makes that line in Almost Famous so good is that he goes through that wild druggy rant that he's like, this is real, you're real, and he's like, and like all this stuff, blah, 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 it's real, none of that other stuff and everything. And he goes, in 11 years, it'll be 1985. Think about that. And then the guy goes, "Do you want to see me feed a mouse to my snake?" Right after that.
Oh, by the way,
yeah.
I just confused Billy Crudup and Eric Bana. Eric Bana's the one in Star Trek 2009, but I was
wondering about that. I hadn't seen Star Trek in a while, so I was like,
I have confused those two actors since the day they first came on the scene, constantly for no good reason. All right, well, Chris, why don't you wrap us up?
All right, that will do it for this episode. Thank you, guys. Thank you, chat, for coming out here. You had a lot of very thoughtful things during our discussion today. Don't believe for 1 minute that didn't go unnoticed. Thank you so much for coming out and watching us today. Next week will be Collateral. That is a really good movie. I can't wait to rewatch it. But that's going to do it for this week, guys. So we'll see you next time. See ya.